So we're clearly disappointed with the result, but going into our bye with 10 games to go, I think, and this was the message to the players as well, we feel pretty positive and optimistic about, one, where we are in the season, two, the capacity for improvement that we have. And even within this game, the Swans probably would say they were a little bit rusty after a longer break. But I think from our perspective, we come away from the game thinking that our best footy, if we can get to it, is going to be pretty close to being good enough. Now, we have a high level of respect for the Swans as a footy team, and they've been pretty hot. And as the game went on there, really good players got into the game. Thought, Heaney and Warner had a really big impact. But it wasn't as if we didn't have our chances late in the game. There were a few just slight execution things that we couldn't quite deliver on late, but it seemed to us that even with 7 or 8 minutes to go, we were a good chance to win the game.
So what do you think the major reason for the turnaround was? I mean, it was a big start, and then I think you kicked 7 of the last 16 goals or something.
Yeah, look, I think their mid certainly got hot, and it's difficult. I think across the season, if you sort of make it a bit more broad than just us, their good players are hard to keep down for the whole game. But we, in some ways, and this is not a concession, but in some ways our midfield group at the moment, without a couple of experienced players, 2 of our best mids over the last couple of years aren't in the team. So we think we've got a bit of a developing midfield, and we knew we were going in against, if they don't have 3 or 4 midfielders in the All-Australian team right at the moment, I'd be surprised. And we've got some guys that weren't even on our list 2 seasons ago or a season and a half ago. And we've really given them some responsibility. And I thought they showed early on that they can more than match it with the best guys in the comp. But it just as they got back into the game, they kicked a few good goals, and when they get their momentum up here, they can be hard to stop. But as I said, I thought late in the game we were coming at them pretty hard, and it was again just a few little minor execution things that we think are easy to fix. That if they were better, would have given us a chance to win the game late.
In terms of that stoppage work at the moment, obviously we've seen a few weeks, obviously Toby's still coming through and wasn't here this week. We saw Reece Stanley kind of struggle at times because Brody had a really good game. What's the key to kind of turning that around to help the midfield that you said, obviously missing a couple of players?
Yeah, so in what way did you think that Stanley didn't have a good game on Grundy? What specifically are you talking about?
More just Grundy was able to kind of assert his dominance a little bit more around the stoppages.
Yeah, I didn't think that. I thought Stanley was dominant early when we were on top. But even your opinion is worthwhile putting forward, and I think it suggests that because Grundy is a well-credentialed player, it sort of becomes a little bit more obvious there. But I thought it was their ground level players that had the influence, and from our perspective, we didn't think it was a ruck issue, the midfield stuff.
Do you think, just going on from that, do you think that Grundy gives them an extra dimension? I mean, he still had 20 possessions as I suppose, an extra big body midfielder, didn't he, as well as the aerial stuff?
Yeah, that's probably a question for them. They're a little bit different to what they were last year with him in the team. But yeah, again, probably say it for the third time. I thought it was their running ground level players that, and our Marty up forward, he looked like a real threat. Even when we were on top.
You mentioned that running and ground level play there. Obviously, your pressure in that first quarter was at a really high level, and saw that sort of drop off in the second term as they started to get back into it. Is there anything you sort of put that down to, or how you can sort of need to have that sustained pressure for longer, or what? Yeah, what did you sort of put that down to?
Yeah, look, I think sustain it for longer is the obvious outcome you're after. It's difficult to be on top of those high quality guys the whole game. And I think they would say the same. They didn't have us under control in the midfield. And I think the way the game seems to be going, there are ebbs and flows within it. So I think the challenge for us is to find a way to close the game down a little bit better. But having said that, they kick some opportunistic goals and like more than a sort of method in and around the ball. We had a couple of really bad structural issues that gave them some goals when we were a few goals up, and I think that's the issue we'll focus in on a little bit more. But again, like trying to sustain that effort for 4 quarters, every team is aspiring to do that, and I don't think anyone's doing it at the moment.
Talking about that structural issues, we saw James Jordan go to Tom Stewart this game. I guess how did that kind of limiting aspect to Tom's game affect the Cats today?
I think when you're a really dominant player behind the ball, a nil or draw for the opposition is considered a win, and we've probably flipped that a little bit in our thinking. We don't set our guys up behind the ball to to necessarily like get 30 touches. So I think they'd be happy with the role, but we still thought Tom was okay as a defender.
And Jeremy Cameron went forward late in the game, able to impact with a couple of goals. Was there any sort of thinking to move him forward earlier, or to try and shake up the game as it was getting?
Yeah, he played forward most of the game. He played a bit higher early on, so yeah, I get the distinction you're making, sort of deeper as opposed to a bit higher as a forward, but he was in the forward half. Yeah, that's a question that we ask consistently and constantly.
Some of those younger boys, you said you're still lacking some names in that midfield due to injury. So Dempsey, Holmes had another really strong performance today. They continue to grow week on week. How, I guess, do you keep fostering sort of that growth, and how do you see their season panning out so far?
Yeah, well, I've broadened that group a little bit, so I'm going to sort of walk you through a few of them. So Jai Clark is effectively in his first year. He was on our list last year but missed virtually the whole season with a foot injury. Jack Bowes and Tanner Bruin have been on our list for a season and a half. And then, Holmes, we could play him anywhere at the moment, I reckon, and have an impact. So that's the sort of question that we're sort of wrestling with. And Dempsey's played as much mid as he has forward as well. So really, of that midfield group, Tom Atkins is the only one who's got a bit of experience. But it's one of the reasons we're optimistic, because we're sort of thinking that those guys are developing quicker than they would have, well, obviously, if they're not in the team. But even if Guthrie and Dangerfield were in the team, they wouldn't be getting the experience. And I think, even if I use the Swans as the example, if you can bring in young, highly talented players and they get games in, Gordon's a better player than he was 10 games ago, and a better player then than he was 10 games before that. So that's what we're trying to build to an extent with Bowes and Bruin and Dempsey and Holmes. We think it augurs well for the second half of the season.
And then when those boys, as you say, they're growing now with this experience, then you get some of these names back. What's your thinking in terms of, do you still want to prioritise that looking forward, or obviously you want to incorporate those other names as well? How do you try to juggle that? Yeah,
well, we think that the two things are complementary. It's not a binary decision. Do we prioritise youth and development or winning each week? Obviously, we won't be able to squeeze them all in necessarily, but we've worked really hard to set up our season so that we're going to be better in the second half. And when we acknowledge that the season's a marathon, we've got ourselves in a good enough position where if we play well enough, the win-loss is under control. So we go into our bye sort of thinking, look, if we get it right, our best footy is going to be up there with the very best.
We saw Shannon Neal subbed out of the game. What was the concern there?
He had a cork, and we wanted to go a little bit smaller, so a tall coming out with a bit of a cork just made sense.
I think, and just finally, positive takeaways, there are a lot of them out of the game that you're able to limit a team many consider to be the clear sort of favourite at this point in the season to be within 12 points late in the final term. Do you take a lot of positives out of that, even though the score kind of ballooned a little bit out at the end?
Yeah, we do, and you might have missed the first part of of my comments, but that's the overwhelming sense that we have at the moment. Disappointed because we thought we played well enough to win the game, and obviously gave ourselves a chance early, but yeah, we'll come away, I think, in the fullness of the review process, thinking we're more positive for this game than negative. And again, some of the parts where we let ourselves down are overnight fixes, and sort of think through our players, and they can all be better in the second half of the year. It's not as if, as I highlighted the midfield group, but it's kind of across the board. We've got, I'm not saying that we're an inexperienced young team, but we've got players that will play together for a long time, and we think that that combination will get better as the season goes on.